Emma Hartley dreamed of a romantic getaway to rekindle her marriage, but Daniel Hartley had other plans. Plans that would end in betrayal, murder, and a chilling secret buried beneath the waves of paradise. Emma and Daniel Hartley were a couple who appeared to have it all. Living in a quaint suburban town, they were the picture of a perfect marriage. Happy, stable, and deeply in love, or so it seemed. Emma, a vibrant and curious woman in her early 30s, had a passion for history, particularly the romanticized tales of the past. Daniel, on the other hand, was more reserved, a man who valued routine and predictability. Their 5th wedding anniversary was approaching, and Daniel wanted to make it unforgettable. He surprised Emma with a lavish vacation to the Maldives, a destination she had always dreamed of visiting. But the real surprise was the journey itself. A Titanic-themed plane experience that promised to transport passengers back to the golden age of 1912. The plane was a marvel of modern engineering designed to mimic the opulence of the RMS Titanic. Passengers were encouraged to dress in period costumes, and the cabin was adorned with vintage decor, from velvet curtains to antique-style furniture. The experience even included a mock iceberg collision simulation, complete with sound effects and dimmed lights to recreate the tension of that fateful night. Emma was overjoyed. She had always been fascinated by the Titanic story, and this felt like a dream come true. Daniel, however, seemed less enthusiastic. He had booked the trip more for Emma's sake than his own, and as the plane took off, he found himself growing restless. Midway through the flight, Daniel's attention was drawn to a flight attendant named Lila. She was strikingly beautiful, with an air of mystery that intrigued him. Lila moved through the cabin with grace, her every gesture deliberate and captivating. Daniel couldn't help but notice her, and soon their eyes met. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to spark something in him. Over the course of the flight, they exchanged a few words. Polite, professional, but laced with an undercurrent of something more. By the time the plane landed, Daniel was already thinking about how he could see her again. Emma, oblivious to her husband's growing distraction, was swept up in the excitement of their vacation. The Maldives was everything she had imagined and more. Crystal clear waters, white sandy beaches, and a sense of tranquility that felt worlds away from their everyday life. She eagerly planned their days, from snorkeling in the coral reefs to exploring local markets. Daniel, however, seemed distant. He spent more time on his phone, often excusing himself to take work calls. Emma didn't think much of it at first, assuming he was just stressed. But as the days went by, she began to notice a change in him, a restlessness that she couldn't quite place. Unbeknownst to Emma, Daniel's mind was elsewhere. He had managed to arrange a meeting with Lila, who was staying at the same resort during her layover. Their first encounter was brief but electric, and it wasn't long before their connection deepened. What started as a casual flirtation quickly escalated into a full-blown affair. Daniel found himself drawn to Lila in a way he hadn't felt in years, and the thrill of secrecy only added to the allure. He told himself it was just a fling, something to break the monotony of his life. But as the days passed, he began to wonder if it was more than that. Emma, meanwhile, continued to enjoy her vacation, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. She made friends with a local tour guide named Raj, who shared her love for history and storytelling. Raj was kind and attentive, and Emma found herself confiding in him about her dreams and aspirations. She even mentioned her concerns about Daniel's recent behavior, though she brushed it off as stress. Raj listened patiently, offering words of comfort and advice. Little did Emma know, her world was about to be turned upside down, and the dream vacation she had been so excited about would soon become a nightmare. The Hartleys' vacation in the Maldives was supposed to be a time of reconnection and celebration, but for Daniel, it had become something entirely different. The affair with Lila, the flight attendant he had met on the Titanic-themed plane, had taken on a life of its own. What began as a fleeting attraction had quickly spiraled into a full-blown secret romance. Daniel found himself sneaking away from Emma under the guise of work calls or spa appointments, his mind consumed by thoughts of Lila. The thrill of their clandestine meetings was intoxicating, and he began to lose sight of the life he had built with Emma. Lila was unlike anyone Daniel had ever known. She was confident, adventurous, and unapologetically free-spirited. She made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years, and he couldn't get enough of her. They met in hidden corners of the resort, stealing moments whenever they could. Daniel told himself it was just a fling, something to break the monotony of his marriage, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. Lila had awakened something in him, a desire for excitement and freedom that he hadn't realized he was missing. Emma, meanwhile, was enjoying the vacation in her own way. She spent her days exploring the island, soaking up the sun and immersing herself in the local culture. She had struck up a friendship with Raj, a charming and knowledgeable tour guide who shared her love for history. Raj was attentive and kind, and Emma found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't expected. She even confided in him about her concerns regarding Daniel's recent behavior, though she tried to downplay it. Raj listened patiently, offering words of comfort and advice. He could sense that something was off, but he didn't want to intrude. One evening, Emma returned to their villa earlier than usual. She had planned a romantic dinner for her and Daniel, hoping to rekindle the spark that seemed to be fading. But when she arrived, she found the villa empty. Daniel's phone was on the bedside table, unlocked and buzzing with notifications. Curiosity got the better of her, and she glanced at the screen. What she saw shattered her world. A series of flirtatious messages from Lila, filled with emojis and promises of future meetings. Emma's heart sank as she scrolled through the messages, each one a dagger to her already fragile trust. When Daniel finally returned, Emma confronted him. Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and hurt as she demanded an explanation. Daniel, caught off guard, denied everything. He claimed the messages were harmless, that Lila was just a friend. But Emma wasn't fooled. The evidence was right there in front of her, and she knew the truth. The argument that followed was heated and emotional, leaving both of them drained. Daniel stormed out, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts. The next few days were tense and awkward. Emma tried to focus on the positive aspects of the vacation, but the betrayal weighed heavily on her. She spent more time with Raj, who offered a comforting presence and a distraction from her troubles. Daniel, on the other hand, became increasingly distant. He continued to meet with Lila, their affair growing more intense with each passing day. The guilt and excitement warred within him, but he couldn't bring himself to end it. As the vacation drew to a close, Emma made a decision. She would give Daniel one last chance to come clean and work on their marriage, but deep down she knew things would never be the same. The dream vacation had turned into a nightmare, and the cracks in their relationship had become too deep to ignore. Little did she know, the worst was yet to come. The affair was just the beginning of a series of events that would change their lives forever, leading to a shocking and tragic conclusion. The tension between Emma and Daniel was palpable as the final days of their vacation approached. The once idyllic trip had become a minefield of unspoken resentment and mistrust. Emma, still reeling from the discovery of Daniel's affair, tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but her heart was heavy. She had hoped this trip would bring them closer, but instead, it had driven them further apart. Daniel, on the other hand, was consumed by guilt and frustration. He knew he had hurt Emma, but he couldn't bring himself to end things with Lila. The affair had become an escape, a way to avoid confronting the problems in his marriage. The resort's grand masquerade ball was the highlight of the week, and Emma insisted they attend together. She saw it as a chance to salvage what was left of their relationship, a final attempt to reconnect before they returned home. Daniel reluctantly agreed, though his mind was elsewhere. He had arranged to meet Lila after the ball, and the thought of seeing her again filled him with a mix of excitement and dread. As they prepared for the evening, Emma chose an elegant black gown, hoping to recapture the spark they once had. Daniel, however, seemed distracted, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. The ball was a lavish affair, with guests dressed in elaborate costumes and masks. The atmosphere was festive, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Daniel was distant, his eyes constantly scanning the room as if searching for someone. Emma tried to engage him in conversation, but his responses were curt and dismissive. Frustrated and hurt, she eventually excused herself and wandered off to explore the venue. She found herself drawn to a quiet balcony overlooking the ocean, where she could be alone with her thoughts. Meanwhile, Daniel's patience was wearing thin. He had lost sight of Emma and assumed she had gone back to their villa. Seizing the opportunity, he slipped away to meet Lila. Their rendezvous was brief but intense, filled with whispered promises and stolen kisses. Daniel knew he was playing a dangerous game, but he couldn't resist the pull of the affair. As he made his way back to the villa, he convinced himself that he could keep both worlds separate, that he could have his cake and eat it too. But when Daniel arrived at the villa, Emma wasn't there. Panic set in as he searched the resort, calling her name and asking staff if they had seen her. His concern quickly turned to fear when he noticed a commotion near the cliffs. A group of guests had gathered, their voices hushed and faces pale. Daniel pushed through the crowd, his heart pounding as he approached the edge. What he saw made his blood run cold. Emma's lifeless body lay at the bottom of the cliff, her black gown billowing in the ocean breeze. The authorities were called and the scene was quickly cordoned off. Daniel was in shock, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of what had happened. The initial assumption was that Emma had slipped and fallen, a tragic accident. But as the investigation unfolded, suspicious details began to emerge. Emma's phone was missing, and a witness claimed to have seen Daniel arguing with her near the cliff earlier that night. The police began to dig deeper, uncovering text messages between Daniel and Lila that hinted at a possible motive. As the hours turned into days, Daniel found himself at the center of a growing storm. The once perfect facade of his life was crumbling, and he was forced to confront the consequences of his actions. The affair, the lies, the betrayal, it had all led to this moment. And as the police closed in, Daniel realized that the dream vacation had become a nightmare, one from which he might never wake. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, and it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. The days following Emma's death were a blur for Daniel. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread as the investigation intensified. The police had ruled out an accidental fall almost immediately. Emma's injuries were inconsistent with a simple slip. Forensic evidence revealed she had been struck on the head before her body went over the cliff. The case was now a murder investigation, and Daniel was the prime suspect. The authorities began piecing together the timeline of that fateful night. Witnesses reported seeing Daniel and Emma arguing near the cliffside earlier in the evening. Their voices had been raised and Emma had looked visibly upset. Daniel claimed they were discussing their marriage, but the police weren't convinced. They dug deeper into his background, uncovering a life insurance policy he had taken out on Emma just weeks before their trip. The payout was substantial and it raised red flags. Had Daniel planned this all along? Lila, the flight attendant, was brought in for questioning. She admitted to the affair but denied any involvement in Emma's death. Her testimony, however, painted Daniel in a damning light. She revealed that he had often spoken about wanting to end his marriage, though he had never explicitly mentioned harming Emma. Lila also disclosed that Daniel had seemed unusually agitated on the night of the murder, texting her repeatedly and asking to meet. The police seized Daniel's phone, uncovering deleted messages that hinted at a possible motive. Meanwhile, Raj, the tour guide Emma had befriended, came forward with crucial information. He had been walking near the cliffs that night and had seen Daniel acting suspiciously. Raj recalled seeing Daniel pacing near the edge of the cliff, his face tense and his hands clenched. At the time, Raj hadn't thought much of it, but after learning of Emma's death, he realized the significance of what he had witnessed. He also provided Emma's missing phone, which he had found hidden in the bushes near the crime scene. The phone contained a voice recording that would become a key piece of evidence in the case. Emma, ever the meticulous planner, had recorded her confrontation with Daniel about the affair. The audio captured Daniel's angry outburst, his voice cold and menacing as he told Emma to stop meddling and let it go. The recording ended abruptly, leaving little doubt about the tension between them. As the evidence mounted, Daniel's alibi began to crumble. He claimed he had been in the villa at the time of Emma's death, but security footage showed him leaving the resort and heading toward the cliffs. The timeline didn't add up, and the police were convinced he was lying. They also discovered traces of Emma's blood on Daniel's shoes, further implicating him in the crime. Danielle was arrested and charged with Emma's murder. The media frenzy that followed was relentless, with headlines painting him as the ultimate villain. The once respected husband was now a symbol of betrayal and greed, his face plastered across news outlets and social media. The trial was set to begin and the prosecution was confident they had a strong case, but as the pieces of the puzzle came together, one question remained. Had Danielle acted alone? Or was there more to the story? The truth was darker than anyone could have imagined, and it was about to unravel in the most shocking way possible. The trial of Daniel Hartley was a media sensation, drawing crowds of onlookers and dominating headlines for weeks. The prosecution presented a compelling case, painting Daniel as a man who had grown tired of his marriage and saw Emma as an obstacle to his newfound freedom. The life insurance policy, the affair, the incriminating voice recording, it all pointed to a calculated act of betrayal. Daniel's defense team argued that there was no concrete evidence linking him directly to Emma's death, but the jury wasn't convinced. The pieces of the puzzle were too damning to ignore. Lila's testimony was a turning point in the trial. She took the stand reluctantly, her voice trembling as she recounted the details of her affair with Daniel. She admitted that their relationship had been intense and passionate, but she denied any knowledge of his plans to harm Emma. However, under cross-examination, she revealed a chilling detail. Daniel had once joked about making Emma disappear during one of their secret meetings. The comment had seemed offhand at the time, but in the context of the trial, it took on a sinister meaning. The prosecution seized on this, arguing that it showed Daniel's mindset and his willingness to go to extreme lengths to be with Lila. The voice recording from Emma's phone was played in court, filling the room with the sound of her and Daniel's heated argument. Emma's voice was calm but firm as she confronted him about the affair, while Daniel's grew increasingly agitated. His final words, "Stop meddling, Emma, just let it go," sent a chill through the courtroom. The recording ended abruptly, leaving a haunting silence in its wake. For the jury, it was a powerful piece of evidence, one that painted Daniel as a man capable of violence. Raj, the tour guide, also testified, recounting what he had seen on the night of the murder. His description of Daniel's suspicious behavior near the cliffs, combined with the discovery of Emma's phone, added weight to the prosecution's case. The defense tried to discredit Raj, suggesting he had a personal interest in the case due to his friendship with Emma, but his testimony remained unshaken. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than a day before reaching a verdict. Daniel was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a mix of gasps and murmurs as the verdict was read. But Daniel remained stoic, his face a mask of resignation. He had lost everything, his wife, his freedom, and any semblance of the life he once knew. The case left a lasting impact on everyone involved. Raj, haunted by Emma's death, started a foundation in her honor to support victims of domestic violence. He often wondered if he could have done more to protect her, but he knew the blame lay solely with Daniel. Lila, unable to escape the guilt of her role in the tragedy, quit her job and disappeared from the public eye. She changed her name and moved to a remote town, hoping to start over but never truly finding peace. As for Daniel, he spent his days in a cold, sterile prison cell, haunted by the memory of Emma and the choices that had led him to ruin. The dream vacation that was supposed to rekindle their love had instead become a nightmare, ending in betrayal, murder, and a life sentence. The story of Emma and Daniel Hartley served as a grim reminder of how quickly lives can unravel, and how the pursuit of selfish desires can lead to irreversible consequences. The truth, once buried, had finally come to light, but it offered no comfort, only a stark warning of the dangers that lie beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. The story of Emma and Daniel Hartley became a cautionary tale, one that lingered in the public consciousness long after the trial had ended. Emma's death was a stark reminder of how fragile trust can be, and how quickly love can turn to betrayal. For Daniel, life in prison was a daily reckoning with the choices he had made. He often replayed the events of that fateful vacation in his mind, wondering if there was anything he could have done differently. But the past was set in stone, and there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. Raj, the tour guide who had befriended Emma, channeled his grief into something positive. He established the Emma Hartley Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence and raising awareness about the warning signs of abusive relationships. The foundation became a beacon of hope for many, offering resources and counseling to those in need. Raj often visited the cliffs where Emma had died, leaving flowers in her memory. He vowed to keep her spirit alive by helping others, ensuring that her death was not in vain. Lila, the flight attendant whose affair with Daniel had set the tragedy in motion, struggled to move on. She changed her name and moved to a remote town, hoping to escape the notoriety of the case. But no matter how far she went, she couldn't outrun the guilt. The weight of her involvement in the affair and its devastating consequences haunted her every day. She lived in isolation, a shadow of the confident woman she once was. As for Daniel, he became a symbol of betrayal and greed, his name synonymous with the darkest aspects of human nature. The dream vacation that was supposed to celebrate love had instead ended in unimaginable tragedy. The story served as a grim reminder that the pursuit of selfish desires can lead to irreversible consequences, leaving behind a trail of pain and loss. In the end, the truth had come to light, but it offered no solace, only a stark warning of the dangers that lie beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives.